me, I actually had two, I guess what you call two intros to the sport. When me and my wife were first married, we had moved back from Texas. We lived in Texas for a while. That's where we were married. We moved back to the DC area, which is where I'm from. And I brought a dog back with me from Texas that a friend of ours had found as a stray, and I took on. It was my first dog. Her name was Gypsy. And while we were in DC, this was we moved back to DC in 94, and with the year after we were married. And while we were there, we and looking for things to do. It was our only dog. We would go on long walks. It was just the two of us. We didn't have a kid yet, so we were hearing about things with dogs, and we heard about the world championships that happened on the mall every year. I was back in the days of Alpo, all that kind of stuff. So we never could get there. For some reason, could never get to it. Either I was working or something. We never go down. But we started in looking up and trying to find out more about this Frisbee sport for dogs. We found that there were local competitions. This was back when they just had the regular locals where sometimes they just did toss and fetch. They didn't even do freestyle at them. They had one in Tacoma Park, Maryland, which is where we lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is right next to that. So we walked, me and Carolyn, my wife, and my dog, Gypsy, we walked from Silver Spring, we walked to Tacoma Park, where, I don't know if you guys remember Rick Wagner.
Of course, yeah.
Rick Wagner was doing,
Shark.
Rick Wagner was doing a freestyle demo at this Alpo local. They had a toss and fetch category, and Gypsy was the type of dog. Gypsy would catch a Frisbee awesome. She was not the best dog at coming back quickly, though. So literally in a 60-second round, we got maybe 2 throws. She literally strolled back. She's very new, didn't know how to train or could return, things like that. So we never went any further with it. Of course, 9/11 happened and things like that years down the line, and the World Championships weren't in DC anymore. They got moved. I think you had it in San Francisco one year, or
outside of
and it ended up being in Atlanta at that point. And then, so flash back now to 2000. I worked for a company. I did part-time work for a company called Geese Be Gone. It's a company that that moved geese off of golf courses and corporate properties and things like that. And the owner of that company was Kathy Fiddler. She hired me with my dog Gypsy. I still had Gypsy at that time. Gypsy was a Border Collie mix, and she was really good about. She had strong eye, even though we didn't do any herding. So she was really good, and she was good obedient dogs. We could push geese off and call her off. She would swim, so we could push geese off of waterways to lakes and stuff. So she hired me part-time to work with my dog. If you had a herding dog that would do the work, she would hire you. So we worked. I worked a couple of smaller sites, and then she was gonna move me into a site that was in Gaithersburg, Maryland, where National Geographic had a huge property, was one of their buildings, and it had a huge lake in front of it. And she was coming there she wanted to meet me there to introduce me to my territory manager, who was going to manage me and help me work that property with my dog Gypsy. In the past, I'd grown fond of the Australian Shepherd as a breed, and I never owned one, but I've read a lot about them, researched them for years, and always knew I wanted one. I even knew what one I wanted. I knew I liked red tricolors the best. I preferred girl dogs. I knew exactly what I wanted. So now I'm meeting this territory manager. Her name was Susan Rhodes. She had several dogs that she used, Border Collies mainly. And so as we pulled up to the property and we introduced ourselves and we were talking and getting to know each other, and I happened to mention my affinity for Australian Shepherds and that I wanted one day, she goes, "Well, I got one in the truck you can have." And I said, "Really?" Apparently the dog had been given to her by the breeder, who had taken the dog back from the first person he sold it from because they complained about her energy level. So he then passed on to her to see if she could use it for goose work. She had decided she was going to rehome the dog because she had since gotten a Border Collie who already knew how to swim and was already herding trained. So she wasn't going to need the dog, but she was going to replace it. And so I said, "Well, what kind of dog is it?" She said, "It's a female Australian Shepherd." "I'm really? What color?" She opens the lift gate to her red Dodge Durango, and lo and behold, it is a red tricolored female Australian Shepherd. 9 months
Check
old.
box, check box, check box, check
Yep,
box.
9 months old. So I decided, yeah, I want this dog. Really cool dog. So my wife's at home with our new baby, our young 2-year-old daughter at this point. We already had 2 dogs. So I'm now thinking how I'm going to convince my wife to let me bring home a third. So I call her on the phone and I said, hey, we have this dog here that they really want us. It's a red Tri-Aussie. I really want it. So my wife, being extremely kind to me as she is at times, said she didn't want to tell me no. She said, well, I'll meet the dog. We'll meet the dog and see how it goes. So after I finished doing the job at the site and they showed me around and showed me what they wanted me to do, they followed me to my house. So I get to the house and so my wife, carries our daughter out and we walk out to the front to the parking lot. We lived in a townhouse, so we had to walk over to the parking lot where they had parked. And she opened the lift gate and opened the door, and this dog, her name was Alina at the time, she jumps out, and my wife had set my daughter on the ground at the time. Dog makes a beeline for my daughter, knocks her down in the grass, and just starts licking her face, just kissing her all over the face. And my daughter is lying on the ground, just giggling and laughing her tail off. That sold my wife. So we kept her. They took her home that night, and then the next week when I met to do my property work, they met me there, brought all her things with her, and gave her to me. So I met the breeder after that. The breeder found out that I had the dog, and we ended up having a really good relationship. Unfortunately, his name was Richard Wren, really good guy. Lived right here in Frederick, Maryland. Ended up dying of cancer some years back.
Oh.
But he taught me how to do stock herding with the dog. So while I was out at his property learning stock herding, I met a lady named Linda Creedy. I know Peter might remember her. She's one of the Mad Dog members.
Mm-hmm.
She introduced me to fly ball. So I started doing fly ball. In the meantime, I'm still working for Geese Be Gone, and one of the trucks broke down. So Kathy, the owner, loaned me her car. And when she loaned me her car, she had a bumper sticker on the car that read National Capital Air Canines. Remember that club, Peter?
I do, yeah.
Right. So I asked her, what's this? And she was a member of the local Frisbee Dog Club in the DC area at the time. This is pre-Mad Dogs time. So I started showing up to some of their competitions, and I met people like Jeff Hoke and Frank Buckland and other people. And sooner or later, I ran into people like Ray Lohman and Frank Montgomery, and I ended up,
My goodness, what's going on?
it's kind of rough here in the tropics. So, and so they ended up getting me into freestyle, and Lena was my first freestyle dog, my first Frisbee dog. 2005 rather, I qualified for my first world championship and went to Atlanta at the time. That's where the championships were, and that's how we got into it. My wife, seeing how much fun I had, decided to get her first Aussie. And so that's when she got our dog Rafe, our first male Blue Merle Australian Shepherd. And my wife and I ended up teaming up. We ended up being honored to place third in pairs. We actually got on the podium first time. Since then, I've not touched the podium since. My wife, however, has touched a couple podiums since then with dogs and stuff. And then of course everything's history. Lena retired, and then I ended up with a corgi that I ended up working, which. And so that's kind of just how I broke into the sport at that point. So.
Yeah, that's one of the pictures when I think of you, is you and your corgi. Talk about a difference in size, George.
Right.
I mean, the cutest corgi, but not only that, but very talented and capable.
Yep. And I never got her for Frisbee. When I got her, Frisbee was not the intention. It was I got her for fly ball. Because short dogs, corgis are actually quite popular in that sport because of the height. The jump heights are set by the small dogs. So I'd never ridden a height dog before. I always ran big dogs with Lena and some of our other dogs. So I wanted to try a height dog, and a friend of ours, Deb Norman, was fostering her. After the owners gave her up because she had too much energy. They thought they were getting a nice small family dog, and that's not what they got. So she took it from them and then was trying to find a home for her. We were home number 7 for that corgi.
Oh, wow.
And she was 1 year and 3 months when I got her.
That's amazing.
That's counting training homes. That's counting training homes and stuff too. But literally, she had lived in 6 different places before she was with me.
I bet a lot of people that are watching have gotten dogs because of the same thing. And that's what's great about the sport, is that it's a way that they can direct that energy and enthusiasm without
Yep.
destroying the house or,
Right.
getting the owners all upset and so forth.
Yep.
So,
George,
My
correct
wife
me if I'm
discovered-
wrong.
wife
Wasn't
discovered-
there a DNA test, something about the lineage of that corgi?
Yeah, that's correct, Swanee. Actually, many of the competitors had complained that that dog wasn't a corgi, it was actually a hamster on steroids. However, the DNA test did come back positive for corgi, so Peter was
Right.
allowed to compete.
Yeah, there was a whole gerbil / hamster / mouse fiasco, but that was squashed quickly. We kept it
Yeah,
out of the media. That's why some people may not know about it. We kept it out. But yeah.
well, it was always fun to watch you guys out there competing because of the size difference. And of course, that allowed you to do a lot of tricks that a person with a normal size dog wouldn't be able to do. Like, I mean, she would just fit up on your foot for stalls and stuff.
Yeah, no, and of course, hindsight 2020, you think of all kinds of even cooler stuff you could have tried. And now there are actually quite a few corgis in disc now that weren't around, at least not in this country. I've been told that corgis were played quite a bit in Japan, but not here in the U.S.
Yeah, I went
there's
to
quite a few notable corgis, not a whole lot of notable ones doing freestyle. There are a few that have popped up. I know there's one in Ohio that's getting into freestyle real good. One in Texas that's doing some good freestyle, a corgi mix, but she looks mostly corgi, and she's doing some really good things. That dog too. And there's quite a few toss and fetch corgis out there. We had a corgi last year when Bullseye Disc-Dogathon, Microdog Bullseye, the corgi was the winner for that from right here from in Maryland. So there's a lot more corgis starting to spring up, and I like to think that Ziva was kind of the ambassador and had a little bit to do with that. So it's kind of fun. It's kind of nice to see that.
I remember a number of years ago going to Japan, speaking of Japan and corgis, and we had a small dog competition. This is before micro dogs. And it just blew my mind because there were like 30 corgis competing in the disc competition. And so everywhere you looked were corgis. And not everybody thinks of corgis as athletic because in this country, for dog shows and stuff, they tend to be large and lumbering and slow and stuff, but they can be very athletic dogs, and they should be really. But in Japan, it was amazing to see 30 of them all, and they were competing in mini distance. So they're doing just not freestyle, but just the running back and forth, but they could motor very quickly. So I've always been kind of a corgi fan. I know Peter says their personalities are a little weird, but I don't have to deal with that. I just enjoy watching them.